So I'm going to take you through everything I've learned since doing 3D in about 2001. That's when I started doing 3D, and I started doing serious 3D in about 2008. That becoming a full-time job at that point, and obviously doing a lot of freelance in between. And I've learned quite a few things that I thought I'd share. I know we've got busy lives, each and every one of us, so I'm not gonna keep you hanging. Let's get straight into it. Some of the stuff, all of what you're gonna see here is my own work. I thought that's important to show you that I'm not just hacking things off the internet and taking lines from a blog and posting it here. This is my experience based on my work. Now I will say this: the stuff that you're gonna see here is a bit. It's not my best work because Google Drive ate my portfolio, so it's gone. I need to figure out how to recover that. Hopefully I can. So the stuff that is shown here is it's not my best work, if I must be honest. A lot of it's quite early on as well. First thing I've learned the hard way is the art is the focus, or the design is the focus, whatever field you're in. The software is just a means to an end, and use whatever software makes sense for the thing that you're currently doing. It needs to be best suited for the job, and obviously the one that you have access to is quite a big determining factor. There's stuff that I love about 3D Studio Max, and there's stuff that I hate about it. There's stuff that I love about Blender, and there's stuff that I think it doesn't do well. But at the end of the day, the focus needs to be on what goes to clients. So for a lot of stuff, I find that I model well in Blender because I think it's very fast, but then I'll do product renders and KeyShot. I'll get everything, all the geometry ready in Blender, and then export that to KeyShot and quickly set up an environment and render there. That's just the workflow that I find best for that. But again, the art is the focus, or the work is the focus, or the design is the focus. The software must never be the focus. That must always stay a means to an end. Next thing, I learned a lot of stuff the hard way, is don't create everything yourself. It's just not necessary. It will take an enormous amount of useful time away from you, and it's unless you are aiming to get better at modeling, and therefore are modeling a lot of stuff, then that's a different topic. Then invest in your learning by all means. But if you're doing client work, buy backgrounds off Shutterstock if you can. Buy 3D assets or download them. I use a lot of the free render people, their free library. I've used free cutout people from Viz people. I use a lot of images from Unsplash, a lot of textures and backgrounds, and HDRIs from Polyhaven. So use what you can off the internet. You don't have to do everything yourself, and please don't. You're gonna waste valuable time. Not everything has to be 3D. Simple 2D elements or some simple Photoshop post-production can really bring life into a project. These were quite early on. I think I did this in 2011 or 12 or somewhere there, and you can see that they're not great. But the people in here is just card cutout PNGs of this people, and you can see that they just bring some form of life to the displays. Don't give clients too many options. It creates options. Apologies. It creates confusion, and it's unpaid for and unnecessary work. So this is a store design that I did in a center near Cape Town. It's tobacco stuff. Now I've got to just put a disclaimer here. I've changed my stance on tobacco. I no longer do tobacco work because it's obviously damaging to health, and I'm taking quite a hard stand on that. But that's side note, just where I am personally. But you can see the manufacturing photos and everything here, and this was one of those projects where I went in and I gave about 6 or 7 different options of what the store could look like, and to my own detriment actually, because what then happened is the client wanted an expensive and a cheap option for each one of those 6 or 7 options. So then I had to do like 13, 14 different store renders, which if I gave them one option to start with, and I gave them an expensive and a cheap version of what that could look like, then the feedback would probably have been, and please understand, feedback is part of the process. You will get feedback. That doesn't mean your job is half done. It just means it's part of the process. But what then would have happened is the client would have come back and said, I don't like this, this, and this. I like that, that, and that. And then I would have probably have done 1 or 2 more renders and not 13 sets of renders. So don't confuse clients with many options. Believe in your option and then submit that option, the strong option. So options, when you do options, they should be the same design rationale. Don't give someone an option don't give someone an apple and a pear, or an apple and a banana, if I can use the analogy. Give them a red apple and a green apple. So stuff that looks like they work together, but they've got different executions. So keep your options kind of close to each other. And then obviously what I've learned through working in the industry and freelancing is that a lot of clients want to see a design that's made in a cheap way and a design that's made in an expensive way. So for a store like this, for instance, the expensive one would have LED screens, TVs, light boxes, everything, and the cheaper one would have paper prints and things like that, or backlit light boxes. So think about how you can tier your design in terms of cost, and then give that to the client as a cheap and expensive option. Then break large projects into bite-sized chunks. Passion exceeds capacity sometimes, which is very true. These ones are, they're actually not client work, this is fun stuff I did for myself. And if you look at something like this, it could be quite daunting taking it on initially. And then you start thinking, hang on, it actually is quite simple. I need about 12 houses, and that's quite simple. That's about 3 days of 3D, maybe 5, depending what level of detail you want to go into, and then you just arrange them. Same for all my work in the industry. I work mostly in the point of sale in terms of designing shop displays, designing shops, putting them in VR. A lot of that stuff. I've done a lot of work for Adidas, so those were always quite daunting because big stores to model, a lot of shoes to model, a lot of clothes to model, and the only way that you can do that really is looking at their content and looking at their store, going, okay, here's a display stand that looks like this, that. There's 5 different display stands. I'm going to model each of those in turn. Then I'm going to take 5 shoes, model them. They're going to be the only ones in the camera view, and breaking it down into something that's manageable from a workflow. So don't get overwhelmed and don't just start. Take the time, plan, and break your project down properly. It'll save you a lot of time in the end. Now, don't spend too much time on something far from the camera. It's costly in time for something that doesn't get a lot of screen time. So I modeled this for Standard Bank. It's a bank here in South Africa, and so obviously I can't even remember what the project was. I think it was Shopper Journey Towards the Teller or something stupid like that. And I modeled these guys, and all they are is they're a tapered box with an extrusion there, and the keypad and screen just flat mapped on from the top, because there's just no point in spending time on, you shouldn't be spending more than 5 minutes on something like that. It's just not part of the project, if that makes sense. So then, if you freelance, this is something I do, I used to do. I don't do it that often now because I understand my own timing, but for me to get to a point where I could understand my own timing, I used Clockify, And what that did is I could log a new project every time I worked on something for someone, and then I could track the time for that project, and I became aware that I was actually undercharging quite radically because I was spending a lot of time on research and a lot of time on what the brand look and feel looks like, and I was never logging that. I just timed for the 3D and billed the client for that. So, so it really timing myself was actually quite educational, and I'm so glad I did it because I learned a lot in terms of what I should actually be charging and what I was charging, and there was quite a big difference. Um, so use a time tracker. I'm not promoting this one. This is just the one that I used. Whatever use you can use your phone, stopwatch, Google Drive, Excel sheet, whatever. But go through the exercise, do it for 5 projects in a row, and I'm sure that you're going to learn something about your own workflow. And then when it comes to cost and time, because a lot of you will, I assume, will be billing either per hour or billing per project. But in both those cases, you're going to need to understand your own cost per hour. So if a client asks you, uh, what would this cost? Don't answer him, please. This is something I also learned the hard way, which, like most of my other stuff, I learned the hard way because I started 3D before all of these tutorials were on YouTube. Never respond right there in the conversation. Don't tell him, oh no, it's going to be $150 or it's going to be $375. Never do that on the spot. Just tell the client, give me 2 hours or half a day or a day to get back to you, so I can just go sit down, break it down, and give you an educated cost. So you don't have to feel the pressure of getting back to the client immediately. Give yourself the time. It will just help you. Now, exposure doesn't fill the tank or feed the family. So, so it's actually uncanny how many times I've been asked to do something with the carrot of exposure, and I'm sorry, I just don't. Number one, this is probably the wrong attitude, but I just don't care about exposure because at the end of the day, I can't put exposure in my petrol tank. Now I know there's exposure in on a massive scale, and that has helped people, but for the most part, getting tagged in an Instagram post is not going to bring in jobs. I'm sorry to say. So my take on it, and welcome to have your own take on this. But for me personally, I don't work for exposure. I must clarify here that there is value in interning for a skill. If you're new in the industry and you're 16 or 17 years old, and you're on school holiday, there's value in just going to a company and being part of that company for 2 weeks or 3 weeks and learn whatever you can and show them that you're keen, even if you don't get paid for. That is a different conversation entirely. But there are a lot of extortionists out there that promise you a lot and deliver nothing. So try and gauge what value exposure has, and does the kind of exposure fit into your career path. So for new clients, what I do is I give them a first time discount of 20%, but I don't tell them that up front. I only specify it on the invoice so that when they get the invoice and it's 20% lower than what we agreed on, and they see the line item breakdown, first time client discount 20%, they can see where that discount come from, and they can see why it's lower than the rate we agreed on, and they're very often surprised, and I almost always get a second project from those clients. So it is value investing in a new client in terms of, it's a good faith investment. I cannot believe I designed this, but anyway, I don't know if, this is one of those pesticides or insect spray things that you get here in Cape Town in South Africa. So obviously you can see what's happening here on the display, but let's not talk about this one. So valuable lesson that I learned is not all your cash is in fact your cash. And so South Africa, our tax agreement is that I need to put away 35% of whatever income I make of freelance. That's under the provisional tax law. Because I've got a day job and I've got a second income through freelance. And then if I spend all my freelance money come tax collection, then I have a massive problem not being able to provide 12 months of income in terms of the 35% that I then owe the revenue collection. So what I do is I've got a separate bank account for revenue collection, and then 35% of whatever comes in goes straight into revenue collection, and 10 or 15% goes into like a maintenance fund or an emergency fund, and then there are other breakdowns that I don't think is applicable for this presentation. Then also, if you have other affiliations, I know there's certain religious affiliations that give some of their salary. There's people that feel very strongly about a monthly donation to charity or whatever it is. Then decide that upfront and put it in Excel. Make yourself a breakdown so that you know exactly where what amount of income goes, and you can just feed a number in, and it'll tell you of the job, the pay that came in, what is the net amount that you have available. So don't render something that can't be made in production. This was this was quite a learning exercise for me in that. It was a difficult one to model in an engineering package. I rendered this in 3D Studio Max, modeled it there, just noise modifier on displacement, and then cutouts for the flats, and that needed to be injection molded. And then it was very difficult to model this in an engineering software. I think I modeled it in Pro Engineer in like 2013, 2014. And then it went to the injection molders and it was finally molded. And then it was also one of those things where we had quite a thick plastic. So what happens if it comes out of the injection molder, it's quite hot. So it kind of bows up and bends. So we had to make a jig in the opposite direction just for it to cool down and stay straight and not bend. These designs all take off-the-shelf parts, and they're designed around off-the-shelf parts. I kept these quite simple. There's a lot of laser cutting that happens here, a lot of welding, a lot of CNC bending, rolling steel tubes, and then also Pro Engineer at that time, and then 3D Studio Max for the concept. So in here, all of that needed to be molded. Obviously, I needed to just use an engineering software to create large molds that could be sent to the CNC people. And then line drawings for these guys, sheet metal parts that I did in Pro Engineer, and then just cleaned up in AutoCAD. So your software, again, it comes to what's good for the function. I could be using only Blender or only 3D Studio Max here, but Blender and 3D Studio Max I could get a machining part out of there, but it's just not going to be as effective as getting it in Fusion 360 or Pro Engineer or Creo for that matter. But if you're designing real projects, try and familiarize yourself with the production process that those things are going to go through. On this one, there was a little bit of bending in terms of learning that I had to go through. It's what would have helped this one, for instance, if I made, this is all one piece and then there's a seam at the bottom. If I made a seam at the top, it would have been easier to manufacture as well as cheaper to manufacture. And obviously just keeping in conversation with your client will help you with that. Then familiarize yourself with marketing and analytics. Social media is not always the best, and I say this because you may not have the best Instagram following and Facebook following or whatever the Instagram or social media platform it is that you are using. YouTube even, you might just not have the best following there, and then targeting in that way might be very ineffective. So your targeting should be audience dependent, and it should be highly relevant. You cannot target exhibition design service towards display stands for a shop or a clothing store. So I know in Facebook, like the campaign area of you can geolocate your marketing, or in Google Ads you can use keywording and a lot of things quite effectively. So find the best way and the best platform to market your skill, and then don't just market it. Also get the analytics back. See if you can track links and track clicks so that you understand where the marketing comes from, and you can then respond to that. So I hope this was helpful. Let me know if it was, and I can do a follow-up with more of the stuff that I have learned. But for now, good luck all the freelancers out there, all the 3D people. All the best to you. I know it can be quite daunting, but it is very rewarding.